federal agencies, our federal partners.
Well, moving on now to the Middle East, and tensions are running high between the US and Iran as nuclear talks teeter on the edge. Iran's foreign minister says a deal is within reach ahead of a fresh round of indirect talks in Oman this Sunday. Tehran insists it will continue enriching uranium under UN supervision and wants all sanctions to be lifted. But President Trump isn't convinced, expressing doubts Iran will stop enrichments, a key US demand. His envoy, Steve Witkoff, plans to meet Iran's top diplomat to push for a new agreement. Trump has warned that if talks fail, military action is on the table. In a sharp warning, Iran's defense minister said it would strike US bases in the region if conflict breaks out. Meanwhile, the US is moving some personnel out of the Middle East amid growing security concerns. Partial evacuations have been ordered in Iraq, Bahrain and Kuwait, as Israel is also rumoured to be preparing for possible action against Iran. With diplomacy stalled and threats mounting, the region is bracing for a critical turn. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Dr. Pansara Amarasinghe from the Kotalawala Defence University, who is joining us from Colombo. Dr. Amarasinghe, the narrative in these discussions and disagreement between Iran and the US has shifted in the past 24 hours. Direct threats from Iran saying that strikes on US bases in the region could take place if conflict breaks out. Also, Donald Trump saying that troops in the region might be moved. How significant are these developments in the ongoing tensions between the two countries?
Absolutely significant. First and foremost, we have to understand the so-called nuclear talks between the two countries have been ambivalent from the very outset, because neither party wanted to have a long-lasting peace or a permanent solution. In particular, when the Americans demanded from Tehran to curtail the uranium enrichment, which was quite impossible with the Tehranian regime, because they simply wanted to have the nuclear weapon once and for all. So the quandary, this complexity was the moot point between the two countries, the peace talks, the nuclear talks, whatever they were. But when you look at the current developments, say for the past 24 hours, mainly the President Trump's the decision to partially evacuate the American embassy in Baghdad, and also the removal of the US personnel in the Middle East, which is a kind of a alarming situation, because we know the United States has dozens of military assets in the Middle East, in particular in places like Qatar and Bahrain and also in Saudi Arabia. They can be easily targeted by the Iranian regime. But now the question comes to the fore is the fact that we really don't know what sort of military capacities are being possessed with Iran, because since the Israelis destroyed their air defense system, S-300 system in last year, their air defense system has been quite vulnerable. At the same time, these kind of macho remarks, the threatening remarks coming from Tehran is not something new. If you can remember what happened in 2020 after the assassination of the General Soleimani, they made the same statement. Actually, they went further. They attacked certain American assets in Baghdad, in Iraq, some naval bases. But they could not completely annihilate or destroy, or rather they could not make severe damages to the American assets. So that is something that we need to understand if you look at the ground reality, to which extent the Iran has the capacity to retaliate or to attack American bases in the Middle East still remains questionable.
Yes, Dr. Amarasinghe, of course, further rounds of indirect talks are set to take place in Oman over this nuclear deal. How influential could these comments from Donald Trump and the Iranian defense minister have in these discussions?
I think they will be quite influential. We have to understand that, as I clearly stated, that Iran would not commit harakiri by going for a waging war with the United States that will definitely drag Israel as an ally of the United States in the Middle East. So they would be quite cautious. And at the same time, we should not forget the fact that the current Iranian regime is at stake, as the country itself is facing a huge economic crisis, an economic problem, which is booming in Tehran, and the civilian population is quite uncertain about what their government is up to do. So the discussion, the peace talk, which is proposed to be held on the 12th of June, is extremely crucial. Especially, they have to sort out the major dilemma regarding the enrichment of uranium enrichment. This has to be somehow decisively decided in this upcoming discussion between the two countries on the 12th of June. At the same time, we should not forget the fact that here the partnership coming from Russia is another considerable factor, because a Russian envoy to the Middle East has clearly stated that Russia would support Iran on behalf of reducing the uranium enrichment.
Yes, and Dr. Amarasinghe, you mentioned Israel there. Of course, the US allied with Israel, and Iran have been involved with proxy groups that Israel have gone to war to. Reports suggesting that Israel could be preparing a strike on Iran. How would that escalate the current situation, and could that lead to a US-Iran conflict?
Doubt. Well, actually, not only Israel, even the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, has stated quite recently, probably yesterday, that they can always have the access for the secretive Israeli nuclear entitlement within Israel. They can attack that in retaliation. So if Israel enters the game, because you see, so far, up to now, both Israel and Iran have engaged in a proxy warfare. The Iranians have been using the Houthis in Yemen. At the same time, they try to undermine and they try to assassinate, or they may try to attack the Israeli interest around the world indirectly. Up to now, neither country have engaged in a direct warfare. So if there is going to be an escalation, it will be extremely detrimental for the entire geopolitical security architecture in the Middle East. And I must confess the fact that if you look at the military infrastructure-wise, Israeli army, in terms of the technology and also in terms of the air supremacy, they're ahead of the curve. They can easily debilitate the entire security apparatus of Iran, for sure.
Absolutely. Dr. Punsara Amarasinghe, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing your insight. We will, of course, be across all of the developments in ongoing negotiations and potential escalations surrounding the US and Iran. We stay in the region now, and in the latest development, the United